Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the month of February, and good afternoon if you are on the East Coast, and good morning if you are anywhere else. Welcome to today's webinar on county broadband program implementations. We're very excited here at NACo to have some of our partners with us today. My name is Jack Peterson. I'm NACo's Director of Strategic Relations, and I'm just going to do a couple of short housekeeping items here today. So first and foremost, if you have any questions throughout the course of this presentation, we encourage you to put those in the chat. Our panelists and presenters will be able to have access to the chat, and they will be able to respond either in the chat or during the Q&A session at the end. Secondly, we will have many slides during this presentation. Those slides will be available, both shared via email, and will be available on our website after this presentation. So we will certainly make sure you have a copy of those. And thirdly, if you have any questions after the event or for the NACo staff, we certainly encourage you to reach out to me or Seamus Dowdle, who's NACo staff on this call, or any of your other sort of regular NACo staff members who you may interact with. With that said, I'm going to turn things over to Seamus, who's on the NACo Government Affairs team, to give just a quick overview of some of the things we're watching for in the broadband space, and then we'll kick it over to our partners at KPMG, Raj and Prakash, to talk about some of the things that they're seeing on the ground as counties start to implement broadband programs. So Seamus, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jack, and good afternoon or good morning to everyone out there today. Thank you so much for joining this session with KPMG on county broadband program implementation. I'll certainly give them the floor in just about a minute or so, as they'll have a lot of the exciting content here today. But before doing that, I did want to mention some of the latest things we're watching in the broadband space on the funding side. This presentation will be focused on implementation, of course, but there is a whole host of federal funding opportunities that are available for counties to keep a close eye on, and that you can follow more information related to those programs on NACo's website. So first and foremost, we do have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. That bill, when passed, created over $65 billion in broadband funds, both for affordability in the amount of $14 billion, as well as direct deployment funds, coming out to around $48 billion. You can go to NACo's website, where you'll see our full breakdown of that piece of legislation, including the broadband programs. We'll be updating more of our resources in the months to come as more information is released regarding when those funds will be deployed. And then I also wanted to make a plug for our upcoming legislative conference. We're going to be having a lot of really excited programming around the latest funding opportunities for broadband deployment and infrastructure. So we hope folks will be able to attend that session at our legislative conference next weekend in Washington, D.C. And with that, I want to introduce our speakers here now over at KPMG, who are going to be speaking more about how counties can really think about the implementation side of broadband deployment and infrastructure. The funding is certainly a step, but there are many more steps to occur after funding is secured. And what I want to do now is pass it over to our speakers, both Raj and Prakash from KPMG, who are going to be speaking more about this today. So Raj and Prakash, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Seamus. Good morning, everybody. This is Raj Shalat. I'm a director with KPMG's infrastructure practice based out of our Washington, D.C. office. I'm joined by Prakash Ganesh, who is the managing director, also focusing on digital infrastructure and broadband, based out of our Washington, D.C. office. So together, we're going to spend over the next 45 minutes or so with you, making sure that we can share some lessons learned and the approaches that we've been having an opportunity to successfully implement with some of this statewide broadband program. We'll make it interactive. We'll make sure that we'll run through the presentation for the next 25-30 minutes, and reserve ample time for you to ask questions. And as Jack had mentioned, If you have any questions after we are done, please don't let that become a kind of a limiting factor. Please continue to share those questions. The idea here is to make sure that any help we can provide, any lessons learned we can provide, any examples that we can provide in order to help you to implement this program successfully. So as Seamus had mentioned, the focus of our discussion is going to be more on the program, the broadband program, and the implementation of the program in terms of planning, execution, implementation, procurement, long-term O&M, and those elements of it. We'll not focus too much today on the funding aspect of it, because there's a significant amount of resources already available on the funding. But a lot of our clients are having a challenging time as far as execution of the program. So we'll do that. Karen, let's go to the next slide. So this is our agenda for today. So we'll quickly go through it. In the first half of the couple of slides, it's just kind of reaffirming our foundation in terms of the importance of the program. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity that counties and state and local governments have in terms of making sure that they're equipped for for the next couple of decades in terms of its economic development, its digital divide, in terms of healthcare, education, transportation, and so on and so forth. And then the second half of the presentation will take a little bit deeper dive in terms of what are the programmatic elements that you really need to focus on in order to have a successful outcome for your broadband program. Let's go to the next slide. So it goes without saying in terms of our world has changed from a connectivity perspective. And prior to COVID, if you look at it, a majority of our investment was done by the private sector. So if coming out of the early 2000s, you will see a significant amount of broadband investment by telcos and data centers, and generally private sector companies have done a significant amount of investment. But coming out of COVID, we had a good recognition that public sector has an important role to play as far as kind of bridging the digital divide and making sure that affordable, fast, reliable connections available to all of the communities, whether it's an unserved area, underserved area, rural communities, and the role that having a fast, reliable, affordable connection is playing in everybody's life. It's very, very critical under the given circumstances. So, what we're going to discuss over the next couple of slides is kind of taking that particular message to the heart and making sure that how do we protect our public interest, and making sure that any sort of implementation that we do it serves our objectives. Let's go to the next slide. So again, the purpose here is to make sure that some of the lessons learned and key considerations for implementing your program successfully that we're going to share with you. We're going to invite some comments and questions so that for the benefit of the everybody as well as in the larger community. Our goal here today is to kind of help the counties and public sector agencies and public officials like yourself to get a better understanding about some of the key considerations and challenges that you'll face in implementing a successful broadband program. And hopefully, the next 45 minutes or so will help you kind of shape your program to a successful outcome. Let's go to the next one. So because we have a kind of a small counties, mid size counties, and a larger counties, right? So what we have done here is kind of gather 4 or 5 critical elements of what are some of the objectives of that we have seen. Primarily, what we have seen is significant amount of attention being paid both from the federal funding perspective as well as county initiatives perspective is to having a connectivity to unserved area, rural communities. So that's a primary goal that we have seen in our experience. KPMG, between Prakash, myself, and our larger team, We are assisting almost a dozen different entities on the state level or larger kind of a public agency level to do a statewide broadband planning initiatives and implementation. So for that, the primary goal has been connectivity to unserved communities. The second objective is the last mile connectivity, which is the fiber to home, making sure that people have affordable, fast connection. The third, though, what we have seen is to fully leverage the federal funding, state funding, local funding to ensure that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to get your infrastructure correct in terms of not only meeting today's needs, but also planning for the future needs in terms of setting up infrastructure that can serve for the next couple of decades. So whether it's a build once, dig once type of approach, making sure that you have the right type of planning, right type of capacity implemented so that you don't have to build this infrastructure ever again. The fourth, obviously, it's making sure that there's enough competition, right? So, from a network perspective, that you can entertain and support enough competition to provide fast, affordable, and reliable connection to your county residents and businesses, so that the affordability aspect of it, that performance of the network is there. And then lastly, just making sure that as you're planning to implement your program, that it's a holistic, in terms of not just addressing, the fiber to home aspect of it, but how do we, pull in the requirements of all of the public agency as well as, potentially the private sector, so that infrastructure is shared and the cost is shared, and as a result, it creates a win-win situation. Let's go to the next slide. So here, what we are trying to kind of depict here is if you look at a little bit of history, just prior to the COVID, what was really driving the investment in a broadband infrastructure. So if you look at it, as I mentioned, the prior investment cycle was more private sector driven. But there was already a recognition because of the technology disruption that was coming. There was a recognition on the public sector aspect of it to make sure that they had their house in order as far as the digital infrastructure and especially the broadband infrastructure. So there was a growing role the public sector was playing, and then came COVID. So obviously everything kind of spiked up in terms of the responsibility as well as available funding and associated responsibility to make a fast, affordable, reliable connection to all of our citizens. So a lot of the jurisdictions are focusing on universal coverage and making sure that they are not left behind as far as digital divide is concerned, right? And then there's because of the federal funding and the critical role that the private sector is playing in, whether it's ISP, whether it's electric co-ops, whether it's telcos, they have partnered with counties and state governments in order to ensure that they can take advantage as far as serving not only the public sector needs and the consumer needs, but they can also do private sector or more commercial needs of the network. So there is a numerous example of public-private partnership in terms of how we can leverage each other's strength and expertise in order to deliver our broadband program. And then going forward, we think that because of how the nature of the government services are kind of working, there will be increasing pressure, whether it's healthcare, education, public safety, transportation, and others, to do more with less. And in that environment, broadband infrastructure and broadband network is going to play a critical role in terms of bringing some operational efficiency and cost efficiency as far as providing the government services at a much more efficient and effective manner. So go to the next one. Here again, kind of if you can look at this particular slide, what is trying to kind of communicate is that as a county government, right, you have a number of different services. And what we have tried to do is to kind of show you some of the kind of examples of how individual public agency has a role to play in terms of this infrastructure. And the idea is to make sure that before you kind of take on any sort of a particular project or your larger broadband program, that you are cognizant of the fact that obviously there's a significant amount of need you will have from a transportation perspective, from if you're running any sort of a local program, whether it's transit system or any sort of a bus program, or if you're doing from a Department of Commerce or economic development aspect of it, or if you're looking from a public safety perspective, education and healthcare. So those are the elements that we they all require a significant capability as far as fast, reliable, affordable connectivity. And not only the connectivity aspect of it, but when you look at from an operation perspective, they all have a requirement to ensure that the network is safe, secure, the data that transmit through the network is secure enough to perform their function. So the essence of this slide is when you are designing your program and trying to execute your program, make sure that you are taking these elements about what sort of a capacity planning that you need, what sort of a network efficiency and specification that you need, and how do you isolate the traffic that is traveling through your network, so that you can protect your from a network security and performance perspective. Let's go to the next one. So here, we have kind of shared our framework in terms of how to implement a broadband program. There are 4 essential parts to this. There's a program governance, there's a funding strategy, there's a program implementation, which is kind of basically the procurement aspect of it, and then there's the importance of the public, partnership with the private sector. So let's a little bit focus on the program governance aspect of it. A lot of time, what happens is, you have an opportunity, this once in a lifetime opportunity, where the funding comes, from the federal to the state to the counties, to local jurisdictions, or to even, to the local agencies like E-rate program and whatnot. And the idea is to get that money to get utilized as fast as possible, or deploy that money as fast as possible. So usually, the money has been allocated to operators like ISPs, electric co-ops, or telcos, or other entities to expand their network. We'll have some requirements about how many households being served, or what sort of a length of network being expanded, and so on and so forth. But what it misses is that from a county perspective, that unless you have a programmatic approach to your entire county to look at what are your existing assets, what are the kind of a missing areas of connections, how do we want it to plan to serve those connections, how do we want it to operate and maintain that, how do we allow resource allocation of that capacity for the how do we pay for all of these services, and what's the best way to share those resources so that we can distribute the cost accordingly. So for that, you will need a kind of a broadband office, or some sort of a business unit to make sure that your execution is driven from a programmatic perspective, that you are prioritizing your investment, you are identifying your needs, and you are communicating it to your stakeholders accordingly, so that you can have a much bigger success in articulating your vision and your objectives, so that your constituents have a clear idea about what we are trying to ultimately get, and then how do we get there. The second aspect of it, obviously, is the program funding aspect of it. We think that some of the jurisdictions have taken advantage of the public-private partnership in terms of to leverage the available funding. So you're not constrained by the money that you have. If you have a larger programs, you can always explore to kind of see how potentially this network can be a revenue-generating asset The transactions we have closed in Pennsylvania or North Carolina, and we are working in a couple of half a dozen other jurisdictions on a similar concept, is that this network can generate additional funding, as far as additional revenue by accommodating some of the commercial aspect of the network, and in terms of whether it's a 5G, whether it's a kind of commercial usage of the network, dark fiber, lit fiber. Somebody wants the conduit, the access to the conduit, and so on and so forth. So when you look at things a little bit more from the programmatic perspective, then you have opportunity to kind of multiply the resources that you have and go after a much more stable program as far as addressing the public sector needs as well as the private sector needs. And then from an implementation perspective, how do you go to the market in terms of your procurement approach, your sequencing of the project, your phasing of the project, whether you have a couple of jurisdictions that can pool the resources to from an operation and maintenance perspective, or even from the implementation perspective. Those are the considerations can give you a little bit better handle on execution of the program. Then lastly, on the public-private partnership aspect of it, there is a significant amount of interest available in building the middle mile as well as the last mile connectivity. The public agency, as I mentioned earlier, the middle mile network, the points of presence that you have is going to drive the affordability of the network, the performance of the network. So if there is a commercial interest on the middle mile aspect of the network, then you can subsidize some of your middle mile as well as last mile operation. So idea is to fully explore those opportunities to make sure that you are not rushing through any decision, and then you're leveraging all of the options that available to you in order to ensure that whatever the network you're building on a long-term basis, it has a financial and operational viability. Let's go to the next one. So here, continuing the governance aspect of it, right? Unfortunately, in some of the smaller jurisdictions, they don't have the resources that are needed in order to drive, such an important program. So if you have a 1 or 2% army to distribute, some of the grant funding, right? Then your focus is to kind of taking the applications or making those applications and distributing those funding aspect of it. But if from a county perspective, if you have a programmatic approach, then you should have an entity identified in terms of like how we wanted to execute the program in terms of making sure that you have supporting policies, procedures, governance structures, so that proper stakeholder consultation is done in terms of prioritization of your investment. What sort of agreement that you are signing with the private sector? How do you hold them accountable for those agreements? How do you ensure that whatever the commitments that they have made, that they are fully executing those commitments? And if they don't execute on those commitments, what are the remedial options that you have? So in order to do that, you need to really have a kind of a entity established within your public sector agency in order to closely monitor that. Once these assets are implemented, right, using it operationally in a most efficient way will require some sort of a strategy in terms of what is the capacity that you have installed, how you allocate those capacity for various users, what sort of operational requirement somebody may have, whether to isolate their traffic because of the security reason or other reasons. So for those aspects of it, you can kind of create your program accordingly, and then have your kind of cost structure according, so that you can recoup those costs and make it a financially operationally viable. From a funding perspective, again, if we can pull various funding to the extent possible, then it kind of gives you the economy of scale and the financial viability of the program. This particular infrastructure, if every agency or even public and private sector, if they try to do this on their own, then often the business model is that it's financially not viable in certain areas. That's the reason we have kind of a connectivity gap today. If it's financially viable, the investment would ought to have been made. And in order for us to bridge that digital divide, we really need to pull those resources and make sure that the operating model is viable. Prakash, any thoughts you wanted to add to this?
No, Raj. Sorry, my video problem has not gone away. But yeah, just to reiterate your point on having a solid governance framework, right? You're going to have multiple agencies within your counties, whether it is transportation, whether it is transit, whether it is healthcare related institutions, they all use common infrastructure. And there's a once in a lifetime opportunity in terms of funding that is coming in. So to Raj's point, just create a framework where different agencies bring different funding. When I say different funding, right, higher ed, the rate program associated with it, the Department of Transportation funds associated with it, there's the looming federal funds coming over from IIJA. All of that have to be pulled to really build that common infrastructure. That way you have synergies. At the end of the day, you make that financial business case, especially for the underserved areas of your community. So.
Yeah, Tom Bergasser from Niagara County. I just have a question. Are you suggesting that the county, when they partner with a private entity to put up the infrastructure and then to run and maintain it, that the county should share in the revenue?
It depends. It really depends on the jurisdiction, right? It's a function of the local laws and restrictions, as you all know. But we have structured ways in which the county can at least cover portions of its upfront capital and ongoing operating costs. And broadband is an investment that you will see will drive revenue over time. And those, in theory, can come back to the public sector agency, potentially to reinvest in broadband expansion or to supplement the overall broader county financial program, right? It's possible. But again, I think it depends on the local laws. It certainly is a function of the lay of the land within your county. But different forms of partnerships can be structured depending on the local laws, right? It can range from the county itself owning certain portion of the broadband infrastructure. And that's certainly not the case everywhere. There's certainly restrictions around that. And there is places where there is a middle mile network that could be created where the county does not directly provide retail services to an individual customer, but creates that backbone to improve the overall financial equation so that this network, this backbone, can be tapped into by private sector participants, driving competition, whatnot. So, and there are other models out there where there's local electric co-ops and existing ISPs, internet service providers, and telecommunication firms. You incentivize them to grow. I think we have to come up with a mixture of these in terms of what will work best. And to Raj's point earlier, right, the financial equation we have seen, if structured right, can be revenue positive to you, right? So
I mean, in essence, if I can summarize that, so don't look at your network as a liability. Look at your network as an asset. And if it's planned properly and you have the right type of incentive for the private sector, this could, return your investment could be substantial. And that's our early experience in Pennsylvania, in North Carolina, and some of the other jurisdictions that we have worked. That potentially you could leverage this revenue stream for 2.5-3 decades to come. And as far as the O&M is concerned, right, there are two options. Obviously, that there's a school of thought that, let's just maintain ourselves. We have the expertise. We will be in control of that. And then there's a school of thought that let's just kind of leverage the private sector expertise. So obviously, both has pros and cons. But in our experience, what we have seen is that if you really drive the economy of scale, and if there is a significant amount of kind of synergy that to be extracted, then private sector could be a better option. They have, if they are maintaining a much larger network in that particular jurisdiction, then the cost of maintaining this network could be significantly cost effective as compared to you creating your own kind of workforce in order to maintain that. So there are, again, it's a case by case basis, but what we are seeing, there's an increasing synergy and convergence of kind of leveraging the private sector for operation and maintenance aspect of it. And, as Prakash had mentioned, to tap into the commercial element of the network to fully explore that potential. Let's go to the next. In the interest of time, we'll kind of go through it and invite some additional questions. Go to the next one. So here, it goes without saying, you guys are much more experienced than us in terms of the importance of stakeholder consultations. For the last, 4 or 5 years, between Prakash and myself, we have successfully implemented a number of different programs at the state level. And one lessons learned out of that experience is that early of it, some phasing aspect of it, and the early phase of your program. So for that, making sure that you have a consensus building and you have a support for your program, and very valuable insight you will learn through your stakeholder programs to ensure that people understand in terms of the action that you are taking or the approach you are taking. You really need to kind of make sure that there is a support for that, so that as you execute your strategy, that there is a general understanding about why you are going a particular route, or why you are going a particular procurement strategy, and for that early stakeholder consultation is very, very important. The second aspect of it is often some of the agency, especially if you're going to use a right of way, for example, and your transportation agency or county is owning the right of way, or the division that has a kind of access to this right of way. So those agencies' participation is going to be critical in terms of ensuring that how do we make sure that make the project as affordable as possible. Earlier we talked about the program governance aspect of it, making sure that you have the supporting policies, procedures, and kind of a administrative support that in order to monitor the performance, as well as from a financial viability aspect of it. So whether it's a cost sharing, whether it's accounting, whether it's reporting. So all of those, making sure that you have a stakeholder support group that provides their input. Obviously, kind of following each and every lead may not be possible, but at the same time, giving them the opportunity that their voices and concerns get heard, so that again, I think it will help you to execute your program. Let's go to the next one. So here, we'll talk a little bit about the procurement approach perspective, right? When it comes to it, on the surface, it sounds like a very simple process. Dig a trench and put a kind of number of conduits and run a fiber. which is not a technologically challenged project. However, when it comes to kind of execution, you will have a number of challenges, right? In terms of whether it's you have underground conditions, whether it's a rock formation, sand formation, any sort of a kind of a clearing, and that you have to do within your right of way, whether you're doing a aerial versus underground installation, what depth you wanted to do it. Are you doing at the edge of the road versus the middle of your right of way? So all of those considerations going to drive your pricing strategy and your the type of expertise that you are asking from a private sector in terms of whether it's a design, whether it's construction aspect of it. So those elements will drive your affordability of the program perspective. And then depending on what sort of a technical requirements you have, that's going to drive your competition and interest in your project. A lot of time what happens is that to make our job easier, we tend to kind of over specify technical requirements and kind of risk transfer aspect of it. And if we don't do that homework, then we end up paying the price for it. So what we have seen in the marketplace is that if you excessively have a very rigid technical specification, then obviously the cost will go up. But the number of contractors who are interested in your project may also get affected as a result of that. Because right now there's a not only from a material perspective, there's a supply chain issue, but also number of contractor, number of resources, number of equipment. All of those are a little bit constrained. The demand is much higher than what the supply can catch up with. So for your procurement strategy is going to be very, very critical, making sure that your procurement approach is balanced and it creates excitement in the marketplace so that you have a competition to get the right type of pricing to make your program a little bit more affordable. From a risk transfer perspective, again, if you gold plate your program, then on the surface, you have a false sense of kind of assurance that you are protecting your public interest, but often those backfire in the sense in terms of whether it's a cost issue, whether it's affordability issue, and whether there's a value for money perspective, right? For some of the risks that we are trying to protect against, that risk potentially could be easily managed if there's a right approach to that. So pay attention to that. And then from a procurement structure, if there is an opportunity to explore whether it's a bundling aspect of it, whether it's a phasing aspect of it, whether we can explore, going in, you may have an idea that you can fully fund the design build project or the construction elements of the project. And if the cost element comes higher, do we have an opportunity to leverage any private sector financing or not? What are the options that we have so that you can still keep up with your schedule and commitment to your citizens as far as your program is concerned, that you don't have to kind of go back to square one in order to redraw your strategy. So those are the considerations that you really need to have, that what if scenario, so that in case if those situation does arise, then you have a path forward. Let's go to the next one. So here is just a summary of a couple of slides that we had talked about it in terms of making sure that you develop your network in a phased manner so that you can reduce your risk. If you put all your eggs in one basket in a single large project, then you're just doubling down in terms of a risk perspective, whether there's a contractor default, there is a scheduling risk, performance risk, and so think about it. What's the right size of project so that you can drive competition and take advantage of that. A lot of times you all have requirements for some sort of a small business participation or minority business participation, and if you kind of do the right size of project, then those local businesses have an opportunity to participate. But at the same time, we don't want to do small chunks of projects. So kind of getting to the right size is very, very important. Earlier, the question about the O&M, again, I think, the leveraging the private sector expertise. Remember that, if you are putting, performance requirements of your network, make sure that, those network requirements are consistent with the, with some of the requirements that the private sector is using. And if your network can support some of the private sector enterprises that are located with, it can meet, your public agency needs in terms of, performance requirements as far as the responsiveness, whether it's speed, availability, and so on and so forth. From optimizing the network operation perspective, making sure that, once you implement this capability, allocating the resources, whether it's you're segmenting certain types of capacity dedicated for public safety, healthcare, education, transportation, other types of usage, or even private sector usage, then you have a proper policies, procedures, and system in order to monitor the efficient usage of the network, so that from a financing perspective or from an operational perspective, you can allocate the cost accordingly and make sure that the network is financially and operationally viable over a long period of time. Let's go to the next one. This one, obviously, protecting your interest is as we had discussed some aspect of it. So I'll quickly run through it in the interest of time. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We'll wrap up in the next few minutes, and then have adequate time for you to ask questions. Obviously, some of the things that you want to pay attention to, that we believe this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for the counties to kind of get their digital infrastructure assets built in a way that can help you attract new businesses, retain the businesses that you already have, the citizens that you have, you can serve them better in terms of whether it's a digital connectivity, fast, affordable, reliable access to the network, and so on and so forth. When you build your public network, right, make sure that it's an open access network, so it's not a proprietary network that if you're giving money to any ISPs or any telcos, that they're giving you some capacity, but it's a proprietary network. By keeping your network open to the extent possible, you can bring new service providers. So 2 years down the road, if some new service provider wants to come in and serve your communities, as long as you have an open access network, non-discriminatory pricing strategy, then that particular operator can come in and serve your community. From ownership of the broadband, what we have seen is that most of our clients and public sector clients like to retain the ownership of the asset that has been created on the public right of way. So you can explore that and making sure that, in case if the operator becomes default, then as long as you have the ownership of it, then you can bring in another operator and continue the services that you want to provide to your citizens. From a technical requirements, making sure that you are taking a programmatic approach. You have a certain defined standards about the network performance, reliability, security consideration, so that no matter which corner of the counties you're located, you get the same sort of a redundancy, same sort of a performance. When you're doing two separate, like say, you have a construction phase and then operational phase as a split approach, then making sure that the county doesn't retain the risk as far as the construction elements of the network in terms of networks, testing and acceptance of it, making sure that the network is constructed according to the design specification, and it's gonna provide the services over the next couple of decades. And the operational entity certifies that when they take the possession for the operational perspective, that network is meeting all the requirements. If you have, I'm sure that a lot of the counties have some existing assets already. So if you're doing that, then interface with those existing assets becomes a critical element. If you have how old these assets, what sort of a performance levels, what are the operational requirements that you have, how do we integrate that, existing assets into as part of our larger countywide network, So those are the considerations that you really need to kind of take into consideration. And from the O&M services, obviously there are a set of performance requirements, penalty regimes, that you need to really pay attention to. The contract term, this particular asset, if you're building a new, generally, the lifespan of this particular asset is, varies from say 25 to 35 years. So what we have seen in the marketplace is that you can sign a long-term commitment up to 25, 30 years easily on a new build asset, and then potentially extend through an optional period like every 3 to 5 years before the asset needs to refresh in terms of whether cables needs to be replaced or conduit needs to be replaced, and so on and so forth. And then, technology refresh, if you have a larger county and if you have a commercial element of it as a angle that you wanted to play, making sure that as the technology disruption continue to evolve, that our network can keep up with that, whether from a network performance perspective or from a services perspective, how do we maximize the usage of our network? How do we maximize the revenue potential of our network? So periodically you can kind of require your operator to ensure that we are keeping up with the pace of the technology disruption that is coming. There are certain consideration needs to be kind of taken into account as far as the payment mechanism. What are we paying? In terms of, are we paying for the O&M? Are we is the network kind of self-sufficient from that perspective? Is the network generating any commercialization revenue? If so, how do we benefit from that? What are the ways we can ensure that our interests are protected, from a net revenue perspective or minimum guarantee revenue perspective? So there are a bunch of considerations that you can take into an account. And the last two aspects of it is often, making sure that whatever the contract you are signing, it can stand it can withstand the legal scrutiny and it's defensible. As far as protecting your interests, right now, in case if the contractor is not providing the services according to the their commitment as far as availability of the network is concerned, performance of the network is concerned, or just a sheer continuity of the business. So in those events, how do we protect the county's interest? If you have to terminate any of your contract, how do we protect your county's interest? What sort of rights that you should have? Those are some of the things that you really need to kind of approach it from a programmatic perspective. Because this is an important asset, and taking a little bit longer view will help you ensure that you retain the control of this asset and use it in a way that maximize the benefit for public good. Let's go to the next one. Then the next two slides is just a summary. So we're going to share, as Jack had mentioned, we're going to share a copy of this presentation. So this is some of the key considerations and factors that we'd like you to take into consideration as you go through your planning cycles and kind of implementation cycles. And what are the factors that basically allows you to ensure that you have a successful outcome. So won't go too much into the detail. Let's go to the next one. Same story here. These are kind of good factors that you can kind of implement as part of your larger broadband program to ensure that the program is successful. And with that, the last slide, just wanted to reiterate. Let's go to the next one. The KPMG services that we provide. This is just a benefit of doing this webinar in terms of opportunity to articulate that we are cradle to grave type of services we provide. We do a lot of assessment of the program, developing the programs, doing the strategic planning, doing the procurement, doing the implementation, bringing in an operator from an O&M and commercialization perspective, making sure that your interests are protected. So we have a very robust experience in that. And any questions you have, or anything that you can take advantage of our experience, feel free to let us know. Lastly, and on the last slide, we do have a contact information for Prakash and myself, so feel free to reach out. Obviously, you can come through NACo and we'll be more responsive, but you do have our contact information in any shape or form that we can help you share the lessons learned and some of the strategies that we have successfully deployed. We'll be happy to share those. So with that, let's open up for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. So much great information in here, and just want to reiterate, we will share these slides for folks to look at, including the contact information, but also all these different pieces that you've given folks the opportunity to think about here. There's probably 3 or 4 questions in the chat, so I want to say, additionally, we will probably transmit any leftover questions that we don't get to Raj and Prakash and the KPMG team, and get you responses or get you connected to them so they can answer your questions directly. I want to start with one question on the ARPA funding side. And Seamus, I'm going to bring you in for the first part of this question. There was a question about whether a county can give funding to a city within the county to help expand accessibility to broadband. So I'm going to have you answer that part, and then Raj, I'm going to turn that to then also include your view on how a county should work with the cities inside their jurisdiction from that sort of partnership lens. So Seamus, why don't you cover the can you do it, and then Raj maybe covers the should you do it.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. So I see the question here. The answer is yes within the Fiscal Recovery Funds program. So there are 2 main ways you can do this. The first is if the county would like to use the funds directly themselves. They can do it as either in terms of responding to a negative economic impact caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So that can include internet assistance directly to families or related measures on that front. You can also use the funds for improving and developing broadband infrastructure within the Fiscal Recovery Funds program. That would be option 1 if the county wants to use the funds themselves. But secondly, you are also able to transfer funds to sub-recipients. So those could include units of government within the county. So if you do want to hand the funds over directly to the city, they can do the expansion of internet accessibility themselves. You'll just want to make sure on the reporting side that you're keeping in touch with how the city is using those funds and making sure that you're following the Treasury guidance. We have a lot more on that program in terms of guidance on NACo's site. And I'll turn over to Raj for the second part.
Yeah, so from a program perspective, it does make sense, right? So if you can leverage kind of neighboring jurisdictions or bringing some of the kind of cities in as a kind of as a pool of resources, it makes from a multiple front perspective. I'll give you a couple of examples. So from a funding perspective, second from the execution perspective, and the third is potentially leveraging the network to its fullest extent from a financially and operational viability perspective. The larger, more robust network you have, then it potentially has a bigger appeal from a commercialization perspective. It has a bigger appeal from attractiveness from larger players, from an infrastructure developer and operator perspective. So if there is an opportunity to do that, definitely we should do it. Segmenting into the smaller network, sometimes it becomes cost prohibitive, in terms of you may have a network, but in order to operate and maintain that network, in order to efficiently use that network, it requires a significant amount of attention. So if there is an opportunity to kind of create an economy of scale, go for it.
Thanks, Raj. We've got about 5 minutes left, and so I want to note that Ian and Dodd have asked a couple of good questions about looking for specific examples. And Ian and Dodd, if you're still on, we're going to follow up with you on both of those. And certainly if others are looking for that type of information, we'll make sure that it's available to you as well. I do want to ask Cassidy's question because I think it gets to a very interesting sort of public conversation about folks within your county or within your sort of regional area. And she asked if it would be possible to expand more on the benefit of a public entity ownership structure of the infrastructure and open access networks. It sounds like perhaps in Cassidy's case, there's a little bit of local resistance to public ownership and management. So she's looking for a little bit more on why a county might want to engage in that sort of public ownership, open access network side. Raj, if you're Raj,
Yeah,
or
sure.
Prakash, if you're speaking to that.
Let me invite Prakash. Prakash, if you want to talk about open access and the benefits of open access.
Yeah, definitely, right. I think it's ultimately a function of the local legal restrictions around this, and there's a lot of states that are publicly against owning infrastructure. Texas is a case in point on that. So there is examples that you can find out from every state that you have to come up with a structure that actually works for your particular jurisdiction. The way the middle mile open access networks work is typically you take somewhat of the middle of the road approach, where the county or the municipality does not provide directly retail services to an individual household or a business, but they do provide the middle mile network backbone that the private sector can tap into. Even that is restricted in certain jurisdictions, right? But that we find is more viable. If there is a role for ownership, it is a role where there is middle mile backbone related infrastructure, especially in areas that need it most, underserved, unserved localities, economically distressed neighborhoods, where otherwise there is in market interest. So to create that public sector backbone as a platform to generate market interest has been used as a justification in areas that where you see there is public pushback, right? We have seen a lot of that specifically from the last mile providers, potentially all the state telecom entities. But there is a gap that exists, and a county needs to service citizens. We have to find a middle path within the legal landscape to create a structure that would work for you. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Prakash. Raj, I want to give you, Prakash, a chance to close it out here with any sort of final thoughts. We've got about 2 minutes. So we've covered a lot of ground. If there's one major takeaway, what would you sort of sum everything up here?
Right. So let me say a sentence, and then I'll invite Prakash for his last minute thought. So I mean, we are very, what we are seeing is that if you use this particular opportunity correctly, you can make a very impactful, kind of contribution to your county's development as far as because connectivity, it's going to be the foundation for economic growth, the lifestyle, the healthcare, education, all aspects of it. It just, there's not a sector that is not, kind of impacted as a result of that. And how you create this infrastructure, how do you, provide those services, it's going to dictate in terms of, future opportunities for you. So we think that, take it seriously, do the type of due diligence that you really need to do, because you will not only be impacting the lives of today's citizens, but for many generations to come, right? So I think we definitely believe that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to make a significant contribution, to the lifestyle and the economic, well-being of our citizens, and you will take full advantage of that. I'll invite Prakash to kind of put a sentence or two.
Yeah, just to add to that, right? Again, this is an opportunity that's not going to come every day. So doing the legwork is critically important, especially for a county. Your stakeholders are going to be multifold. So get your governance in place, create that central unit that becomes the focal point for everything that is broadband, and create that stakeholder buy-in fairly early in the process, create that policy framework that you can operate long-term with. Once you have that governance in place for multiple uses, different sources of funding, that's the most complex piece of the puzzle. If you get that in place, I think the funding strategy and the partnerships we talked about, right, will automatically line up. That sets you up for this long-term program implementation. There's going to be a lot of grant money that's going to be coming your way. And grant grant money, think of grant money as a way to incentivize private sector, not as a giveaway to private sector, but the private sector needs to invest to take X dollars of grant to make it 2X dollars and effectively, solve the digital divide problem in your jurisdiction, right? So use the grant program as a vehicle to do much broader and better things, including implementing your middle mile network. So with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Super. Thank you, Prakash. I want to say thanks again to Seamus on the NACo side and Raj and Prakash on the KPMG side. Again, if you have their contact information is on the screen, so certainly feel free to reach out directly. If you reach out to me or somebody else on the NACo side, we can also connect you. They're, as you can see, they're a great resource for us in broadband and many other program and practice areas as well. So Raj and Prakash, thank you again for your partnership and the information today. As we've said, we'll post this webinar and the slides online, and we look forward to hopefully seeing many of you at the legislative conference in just a couple of weeks or at an event later this year. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks all.